Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Neurodiverging Podcast. I'm Danielle Sullivan, and I'm your host, a certified life coach and an autistic parent. I am so excited to welcome Skye Rapson to the podcast today. Skye is a doctoral candidate in population health and was diagnosed with ADHD at the start of her doctorate. She then founded Unconventional Organisation, which is spelled with an S in organization, which provides strengths-based, research-backed online coaching for clients with ADHD. Before I introduce Skye, I'd like to thank all of my patrons for supporting this episode of Neurodiverging. I hope that you are all enjoying all of the new neurodiversity resources that came out this month. Patrons receive exclusive access to lots of goodies, including access to my back catalog of recorded neurodiversity-related webinars, self-help and coaching downloads, a 15% discount to my course, Autistic Emotions Explained, and many, many more perks. If you want to be one of these amazing folks and support Neurodiverging, please check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/neurodiverging. The link is below. You can pledge $1, $5, or $10 a month to support the podcast and keep it going. Funding also goes to help me provide support for low-income neurodivergent clients, so it is very, very appreciated. Plus, through the end of March, all new patron pledges are being donated to support relief efforts for the Marshall fires. And if you donate $5 or more, you'll get a surprise in the mail. It's a great opportunity to check out all of the patron-only resources and help a fantastic cause. Learn more, please, at the link below. Without further ado, let me introduce you to founder, ADHD coach, and researcher Skye Rapson. Skye is an academic with over 7 years of experience working in adult education. She has studied in various fields including psychology, sociology, and public health, and is now a doctoral candidate in population health. Skye was diagnosed with ADHD at the start of her doctorate, and since then she has dedicated time to researching and disseminating ADHD studies, focusing on supporting others with strengths-based, neurodiverse-friendly tools and systems. Skye founded Unconventional Organisation with an S in organization, which provides strengths-based, research-backed online coaching for clients with ADHD. Skye is based in Australia but serves folks worldwide. You know how much I care about research-backed interventions when it comes to supporting neurodivergent folks, so it is no surprise that I loved this conversation with Skye. Today we're talking about Skye's background and how she found out about her ADHD in the midst of her doctoral program, how and why she started her ADHD coaching business, and then we're spending the bulk of our time with tips and tricks to help ADHDers stay organized and confident at work and at school, which is Skye's specialty. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome, Skye, to Neurodiverging. It's great to have you today. How are you doing?
Thanks. It's good to be here. Yeah.
Skye, for those who are just catching up, is a neurodiverse academic and the founder of Unconventional Organization. And you were a late diagnosed or late identified ADHDer, right? And have started this business pretty recently to help other ADHD folks. So can you tell us a little bit about what made you seek the ADHD diagnosis and what it changed for you?
Yeah, no worries. So I didn't really seek an ADHD diagnosis, which in hindsight, as I'm sure for lots of people, feels like, why not? but I actually, I struggled with grammar throughout my master's. My responses were like, great, but like the writing, should probably do something about that. So I thought I might have dyslexia, and I went and got tested for that, or just for everything in general with the university's Inclusive Learning Centre. And they came back and they said, nope, you have ADHD. And I went, what is ADHD? and so they were like, you have to go get diagnosed, and I did, and I found out about it, and it was a big shift. Actually, it was huge, because I think it really explained a lot of things that I'd been doing. I'd been academic hopping around, if that makes sense.
Yes, I did that too.
yeah. Everything is like, oh, I did that for a year. Let me do something else in a totally different department. And it's good to just gather lots of information from different departments. That was my justification. And then when I got the diagnosis, I was like, oh, okay, this might be what's actually going on. And that made a huge difference. And it also gave me something that I was interested in that was enduring, because I'd been sort of struggling with that as well. Like, what am I going to do with my academic life? And that provided an answer and a question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So you thought you had dyslexia and then it turned out to be ADHD. Were you familiar with ADHD at all before getting that information?
Not really. I didn't know anything about it. I went and looked it up. I found how to ADHD like so many other people and watched everything about it and then yeah, I just yeah, I didn't really understand it, especially with adults. I had a somewhat of an understanding about it from I'd studied psychology in my postgraduate, and so I understood about ADHD, what we were taught, in human development, that kind of thing. But that's very different from, as an adult, I have ADHD. What does that mean? I had no idea what that meant.
Yeah. So how did you get from there and being somewhat unfamiliar with ADHD in adults to kind of becoming an executive or ADHD coach, right? That's how you call
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
Over here in the
yeah,
United States, sometimes they're called like executive function coaches or sometimes ADHD coaches too. So yeah. So that's a
yeah.
big leap. So how did you get there?
Basically, I started from pretty much at that point. I started a PhD alongside my PhD.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, because I had access. I was very, very lucky to have access to all of the journals and articles to actually find the research. So I watched and read everything I could, and then I was like, okay, I'm an academic. One of the things we get taught is like, you should, if you're interested in something, you should write blogs about it. You should, do things about it. I'd actually been in adult education for about 8 years before that. I'd been a youth line phone counselor before that. So when I started my doctorate, I was like, okay, I'm just going to focus on this research. And then I got diagnosed, and I was like, you know what, I can do something, something on the side as well. And so I started doing, the research myself. And I also started working with the Inclusive Learning Centre, because they said when I got diagnosed, you've got a lot of strategies, and I'd already worked with developing groups. So I developed a group for postgrads who were neurodiverse, and we sort of worked together. And then from there, I started working with schools, and I started writing a blog just to kind of get myself to do the research, if that makes sense, having
You
that
need to have a reason
deadline.
to produce
Yeah,
the thing. Yeah.
exactly. And I posted it on Facebook groups because that was, what I was doing, and people really liked it. And I thought, okay, let's try. When lockdown came, I was working with schools, working with teacher aides, just sort of teaching them about ADHD and how it worked, and how it kind of using my skills with psychology and sociology and adult education to kind of talk about this area. And but then lockdown happened, so I couldn't do that anymore. So I thought, okay, let's try working online as a coach. I heard about it and I decided to try it, and developed slowly, sort of one client at a time, into what we have now.
Yeah, that's like so exciting. And can you tell me more about like what do you have now? What do you guys do?
Yeah, sure. So at the moment we have, there's myself and there's 3 other ADHD coaches. So they all have similar backgrounds to, where I came from. They have ADHD themselves. They have worked in various sort of helping community support jobs, so social worker, teacher, health therapist, and so they also then worked with me in terms of adding that research element. So they've been working with me for a couple of months, and they'll do the training and learn the research and all that kind of stuff. And so there's those people. They're amazing, really awesome, and I'm very lucky to be able to have people who are as enthusiastic about it as I am. And we also have online coaching, online courses, and we have the same articles pretty much as we did at the beginning. They're called articles now, not blogs, because eventually I was putting enough references in them that I was like, this is an article. and just everything that we talk about really is just on those articles that you can read about different routines and like combining research with what we work with every day with people as well.
Yeah, that practical aspect is so important. But then I love that you're evidence-based and research-based, and that's something I try to do too, because I feel like there's so much bad information out there about
Yeah.
neurodivergence, or old information sometimes, that it's great to be able to recommend resources that are evidence-based, that are looking at the actual research that's out there. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was a really fun experience. I'd been doing research for such a long time. It was sort of ingrained to add references to everything. I just couldn't help it.
Yeah, you do it. That's what you learn when you go through a master's.
Yeah. and then it was interesting. People really appreciated it, which was great, because no one really cared when you were doing a master's. They were like, yeah, whatever. Maybe I'll read it, maybe I won't. And then also just having the ability to be like, this is what the latest research is. And now very lucky to have an actual researcher on board with us, and he does literature reviews for different topics before we actually write about them. So we have a lot more confidence.
That's so helpful. Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe
It's
one day
really great.
I will have a researcher on my team. That would be amazing.
Highly recommend.
Yeah. Good. Thank you for that. So what are some of the most common issues that clients come to you with as an ADHD coach? Because there's such a broad variety of ADHDers out there.
Yeah.
What do you find?
Initially, it felt like that people were coming for a whole bunch of different reasons. But after a while, especially because when they come to us, they write a little thing in the 20-minute consultation, why are you here? I went through and had a look at them. And a lot of people come for essentially what I would call overwhelm.
Yeah.
So they come because for whatever reason, they've been sort of trucking along, doing well, and then something happens and it's just one thing too much. It might be a job, sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's promotion, sometimes it's job loss, sometimes it's COVID, all of those kinds of things. And people just go, this is it. I was at capacity, and then you added one more thing, and I can't handle it. I feel overwhelmed. My systems that I had in place that were kind of there, but I didn't really know, like, we sort of build our own systems, especially if we don't know we have ADHD, we build them somewhat like based on trial and error. You're like, this works.
Yeah.
So that system isn't working, and now I need help, or sometimes people come because they've gotten diagnosed, and now they're like, oh, like, I got diagnosed, I'm on this, diagnostic path, but I want to learn more. So yeah, it's kind of like whatever it is, it's just one thing too much.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a lot of, I'm autistic, so I work with ADHDers, and a lot of autistics are also ADHD. I know you kind of work that crossover too in the population. And it's so interesting because a lot of autistics also just hit that overwhelm point, and something breaks and they need to develop new routines, new systems, new everything around it. So lots of crossover.
Yeah.
And do you work mostly with ADHDers, or do you, because I know you work with ADHD, neurodivergence in general, but ADHD, autism, people who are crossed over. Are there any other groups that you kind of specifically work with?
We work with ADHD, what we call ADHD plus.
Yeah.
So, you have ADHD as part of a spectrum. There's a lot of other, we know that research is a lot of comorbidities around ADHD.
Yeah.
We tend to work sort of with the ADHD specifically, but then, we have a lot of clients who have ADHD and autism, and they find that the strategies for ADHD are helpful for some of the autism as well. So it just depends. But we work with people who have a lot of different things, but focusing on our scope within that. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. There's a lot of crossover with ADHD and other co-occurring issues. So cool. No. So I wanted to talk to you today about ADHD at work. I know we talked about this a little bit before, but I know a lot of ADHD adults have trouble staying organized at work. There's a lot of demands. There's a lot of interruptions with, like, people pop in and ask you to do a thing while you're doing something else and that kind of stuff. So it can be hard to keep track of everything and kind of prioritize optimally, I guess. So I wanted to ask if you have any, like, strategies or advice for those people, and what can we do to help them?
No, it's a good question. I mean, we have lots of strategies because of the fact that this is a big area that people work with us on. The number one, the first thing, if someone comes to us and they say, I'm struggling at work, is we try and establish the expectations of the job, because sometimes it's difficult to know. It might be a new job, or there might be expectations that are being set up that aren't actually there, or there might be expectations that are not going to be working with ADHD accommodations and what you need. So we try and, talk to people about, speaking to a colleague or a supervisor and just kind of getting a lay of the land a little bit. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, actually, like how many emails, like what's the response time? Like how many errors do people generally make on this document before it gets sent through? Like all of those very practical things. And then once we have that understanding, we can go, okay, this is what your expectations are. This is where you're at. Sometimes people are doing more than they're expected to do and not realizing it, because we have a lot of self-criticism sometimes with ADHD and that perfectionism of like, I can do it in 2 days. And everyone's like, great. I don't know why, but okay.
Yeah.
And then that can create relief. So sometimes there's that side as well, which we don't always talk about. And then sometimes it's also, being late or forgetting things is a huge factor as well. And so we start to kind of get closer to what the expectation of the workplace is and what the person's happy with, and then try and do accommodations. And that can be setting up, often it's a planner that works for people. So an ADHD friendly planner, because people are like, I hate planners, I hate routines. I know. I swear this one's neurodiverse friendly. Like we have reasons behind it and why it exists and things like that. So we try and do things that take into account time blindness and working memory, and then we work specifically. And sometimes it's very, very specific. If you have a workplace that, for example, like, well, I can't carry a notebook, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. Those are the ones that we really need to kind of develop and test. We're always testing strategies with people about, okay, let's try this system, come back next week. Some of it will work, some of it won't, and we'll keep adjusting it until it does work for you perfectly. And that's what we do.
Yeah, I think I love that you're creating a measurable system for folks, because I think, like you said, a lot of neurodivergent people are doing better than they think they are, and just don't have, haven't kept a history of what they've been doing. So they can't see that, we can't see that we're doing better than we can. So I love that it's measurable. And the testing is so important, because you don't know what works. And sometimes you have to tweak a lot, to get to somewhere that someone's doing really well.
Yeah. Yeah. So often it's not in the strategy. Sometimes it's, people are like, oh, that's great. I actually did that 3 months ago and it worked, and then it didn't. And I don't know why. And I stopped, so it's pulling those pieces and going, you already had a lot of these things yourself, but we're just giving you the link to like the why. This is based on, research. This was supporting your working memory, and then, flexibility needed to be added, but it didn't. And that's why it fell down, and kind of putting those pieces together, giving that confidence. And then at the same time being like, let's just experiment, let's just try it. If it doesn't work, that's totally fine. Like, we'll adjust, we have the systems, we have the ability, rather than like, here's the perfect system. It didn't work. Oh no, I guess we'll just stop trying, which is so commonly how it feels sometimes.
Yeah, I think a lot of us get stuck in that black white thinking of, it's either going to work perfectly the first time, or I have failed as a person. And that permission to be flexible and to try new things and to fail is such an important piece of coaching, I think, because and for us to internalize as well, because you're going to have to fail if you want to make it work the best way it can, so, and that can be hard though. Yeah, it
can be hard. We often talk about, it's okay to bring your worst self to coaching. It's great.
That's wonderful. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's like, it's great on the days when you're like really motivated, those really high executive functioning weeks, you got things done, they seem to work, that's awesome. But there's also those weeks where you just didn't have the bandwidth, nothing got done. And those are the weeks we can often do the most work, because that's where the most troubleshooting occurs. And troubleshooting is such a huge part of what we do. It's not just strategies, it's about testing those strategies and experimenting with your life specifically.
Yeah. And when you need the most support is the perfect time to test how those supports are working, right?
We're much more like, nah, I couldn't do that on those weeks.
Yeah. Right away if it's too much. So that makes total sense. And what about, is there anything that I know this is a very broad question, but Is there anything that employers could be doing better for ADHDers in the workplace? Like from your perspective as a coach working with the employees, do you see any patterns in terms of like what workplaces should be doing to offer more support, or maybe to flip it, what ADHDers could be asking for in the workplace to help them more?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. A lot of times people come to us because they say, hey, I got diagnosed. I told my employer, or maybe my employer already sort of knew because they were part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, I really want to help you, like, what can we do? And you went, I don't know. So a lot of it's about accessing that information, like being able to, I think if an employer wants to work with their ADHD clients, it's a case of, of going, okay, what does that actually mean for them specifically? For them as an adult? One of the things that can happen is that they'll go, okay, well, none of your deadlines matter anymore. Don't worry about them. We'll just get to it when you get to it. But that can be really hard with ADHD.
Yeah.
And, some of my clients are like, that's great. It helps with my anxiety. I can just kind of set my own goals. And some clients are like, that was the worst decision.
I will never, ever complete this work now if I don't have a deadline.
I don't have a deadline. The dopamine is gone. So it's really about understanding the research, understanding what's going on. Like, okay, I have ADHD, which means I struggle with executive functioning, which means that I'm particularly struggling with working memory, or meetings are boring because I need that 10-minute break to go get some dopamine stimulation between meetings, that kind of thing. But also I'm still myself, and I'm still a person with my own experiences and my own life. So while other people might need a quiet place to work in, I wanted the flexibility to work in a coffee shop. So it's kind of like a combination of communicating just as you would with anybody, and understanding that this person has a brain that works slightly differently, and sort of getting a sense of that. Yeah.
So just the employer acknowledging that somebody might need something that's a little bit off the wall compared to the rest of the group can be a big help to an individual.
And that they might need it. They might say, hey, can I try a coffee shop? And they'll come back and they'll be like, actually, you know what, the coffee shop didn't work as well as I thought it did. So having that open communication about, okay, let's try something and see if it works, and have a bit of that flexibility. It's complicated.
And I'm sure it's highly individualized, which is why coaches exist, right? Because not everything works for everybody. So
or in every workplace, sometimes people are like, I really wish I could do that, but I can't, specifically in this workplace. So then we have to work in additional accommodations.
That makes sense. Thank you. Is there anything that you wish that was more widely known about ADHD or about working with ADHD? I know, again, it's different for every person, but just from the folks you work with and talk to, are there any reoccurring themes or patterns?
I think I wish that people with ADHD and people who knew people with ADHD knew that people with ADHD are often trying really hard a lot, and there's a sense of like, oh, people with ADHD aren't trying, or but often the most hardworking people that I meet and talk to are people who have ADHD, because they have a work to do and a home to run, and then they also have all of these executive functioning things that they're trying to figure out and trying to fix and trying to keep up with, and things like taking a break on the weekend. We talk about taking a no should day, where you just take all your executive functioning, you put it in a box, and you just go, today I'm just gonna be, and not worry about time, and just get lost in things. And for a lot of people, they're like, I don't have time for that. I have so much work to do. I have chores. And so a lot of it's also just like putting down a lot of that, figuring out, similar to expectations. I wish people knew that, like, you're trying really, really hard, and you're actually doing a lot of work. It just doesn't always show up because sometimes we can work in ways that aren't as helpful to us, or we're trying to do neurotypical ways of organizing, and they're working only 70% of the time, and we're not getting the dopamine for them in the same way as neurotypicals are anyway. So we're just constantly working.
It could be you're doing twice the work for 70% of the results sometimes.
Sometimes. people just don't realize that, and people around them don't realize that. And so a lot of times when people come to us, they're just completely exhausted.
Yeah. And that makes sense. Thank you. So good advice to be flexible with people. Keep that open mind.
Yeah.
Don't always expect things to be done exactly the way that you would do them, because
and recognize if you're trying really hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're doing, even if you're not seeing success yet.
Yeah.
You're like, I am really
give yourself
hard.
that credit of working really hard. Well, thank you for that. Can you tell us more about Unconventional Organization and where people can find you?
Yeah, sure. So you can find us at www.unconventionalorganization.com. You can also find us on Unconventional Organization across social media, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Unconventional Organization with an S.
I was just going to say, for our American listeners, organization has an S in it. So notice that, please.
But other than that, we're an international organization. So we have coaches based in the US, based in Australia, that work with people around the world. We've worked with people from Japan, UK, like all kinds of places. We also have online courses that you can take, developing ADHD specific strategies for routines. We've got like a get and focus routine that works really well in the workplace, actually, to help you just kind of use research behind ADHD to kind of go through a 5-step process to actually focus at work.
Oh, wow. That sounds awesome.
And it works pretty well. It's been tried throughout, the year with good results, but I always, say bend it and break it as you will. These are all, for you. And we also have the articles. They're available for free. They have a lot of the strategies themselves in them. So feel free to browse. We have them in categories now. So you can search, the workplace or overwhelm or routines, and find a bunch of research-based strategies just there if you want them.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And do you have any last advice for ADHD folks listening or feeling overwhelmed in their own lives, besides come talk to Skye and consider coaching?
I think it's just, if you're feeling overwhelmed in your own life, it's a case of understanding what we talk about a lot is this idea of strong strengths and strong weaknesses. With ADHD, we have strong strengths, where we have, that creativity, that problem-solving skills, we're great at coming up with new ideas, and we have strong weaknesses, that are executive function difficulties that are very evident. And so it's a case of understanding, like, hey, I have these weaknesses, I'm going to work on them, but I also have these strengths, and coming with that balanced sense of self and being, positive and aware at the same time, and sort of taking that into the world and knowing that, you have things that people really value, as well as things that people, that you want to work on and develop as you go.
Thank you. Yeah, the strengths-based approaches to coaching are just so important, and to recognize that even if you are struggling in the moment right now, there are lots of things about you that you can do that other people cannot do, that are, bring value, that, just, you got to keep in sight even when you're struggling.
It's good to have them both in mind. I often say, imagine, you're a neurodiverse person, we're great at, coming up with 3 new ideas a day. Imagine if that was somebody else's job. They might struggle more with it, but often our jobs are executive functioning and not so much that. But we do definitely have things that we bring to the table. And once you work on your struggles, you can start to really focus and hone in on those strengths and showcase them much more as well.
Thank you, Skye. Appreciate it.
No worries. It's great to be here and great to talk to you.
Thank you so much for being here with me today. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please consider leaving a rating on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or anywhere else you review podcasts. Show notes and links for Skye and Unconventional Organization with an S are at neurodiverging.com and also in the show notes below. Thank you again to my patrons for supporting this podcast and everything we do at Neurodiverging. You are all amazing, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your support. Join us for more at patreon.com/neurodiverging, and I hope to see you there. Please remember, we are all in this together.